welcome to day 7th of December 2025. I'm your host, the author, David Applegate, author of the books The Boyhoodicade, Power Games, Into the Elsbound, and Erotic Tales from the Empire. I should be fine right now. I'm just babbling on, but earlier today I did a stream and it got cut off at the end, which is weird. So I apologise. I don't know what went wrong. I don't know if there's anything I can do about it. And I think that's the real frustrating part, when something goes wrong and you can't fix it. You just have to write a sternly worded letter to the support team and say, "Oh man, this happened today," and they'll say, "Well, we'll look at it," and then they'll say, then in a day or two, "We fixed it." And yeah, life goes on, right? Life goes on. But not for everybody, of course. For another couple of hundred people, life ended today. Now, I know some people found yesterday's video quite amusing. I amused some people. Yeah, that is good. And some of you also said, maybe tone it down just a little. Not everybody thinks the Putin is under the bed. Yes, the Putin, he is everywhere. He is the sneaky. And let's see. Let's have a look at Putin's handiwork today. Oh no, bad news. Russia's made advances towards Vilka? Yeah, Vilka, fighting in Parib. Zelensky still hasn't taken Vorovsk. And so, I mean, they've got half now, but still, it's taken years just to take a little bit of Vorovsk. And yet the Zelensky says, "Oh no, we're defending all of Europe. Putin plans to invade Europe." But what? When? He's still stuck in Pava. Alright, so Russia's claimed a victory in this a couple of towns recently, and haven't mentioned war, but he's claimed victory in Kucherovka. Ukraine, of course, disputes this and refuses to update the map. But this is near Kupiansk. It's not the only place Russia has claimed to advance, and Ukraine has not updated the map. Or so far, we've seen, well, I would say not every victory. Remember Bakhmut. How many times they claimed victory in Bakhmut? But only to see the Ukrainians hold them back or push them back. And then, it took 9 months to get the last of the Ukrainians out of Bakhmut. And it's taken longer than that to get the last of Ukrainians out of this little area here. And now we're bogged down in the Lyman area with no advances. The Battle of Seversk, still only a foothold. But Putin says, "I put my door." He licks. This is what the wars come down to. Putin licks his finger and sticks it on the map and says, "Mine! Do you want it now?" And then Zelensky licks his finger and puts his finger on the map and says, Do you still want it now? That is what I think the war has evolved into. Say, get the cookie, they lick the cookie, put it back on the table and says, do you want it now? And Zelensky licks the other side and says, do you still want it now? And bound and round it goes. Each time they're hoping they lick only the same side they licked. Of course. But as you see, there are many places on the map there is no movement. And then every day Zelensky says, we're still here! Victory! Of course, one of these days, he won't wake up. Just like he says, every day. Remember, one day there'll be a day after Putin. And then Putin says, the same goes for you. People should remember that. Everything you could do in Russia, you wanted the Putin, you don't have to wait. The Putin come to you. Just wait. But you may be waiting long time, but still, they've closed the gap here. They're still fighting in other areas. Do you think they've gained ground? Maybe little, maybe little, but still. Rodinishk, what is the commander? Paid by the hour? Probably. Now, Russia has also claimed. Well, this is interesting. Wasn't this Ravine? Why is it Esfili? Maybe it was. There it is. The little one here. Yeah. It's the little one here. Now, Maryad and others are still holding out. It's a little bit of territory, I think, could be just down to, the rendering of the map. So, maybe no more territory here. But maybe, Russia has claimed Rovnoye as well. But apparently this is an old story. This is one that appeared after a record yesterday because the map didn't update. I don't know why. Again, you miss out on stories all the time because they hide them. They don't update them. So we have updates here, but not much. A little bit of updating here, but not much. Now remember, there was an offensive the Russians had before. But look at this. It's such a tiny area. We don't know. And that really looks more like an airport than anything. But it's supposed to be a village. On the map, it looks like. Yeah. But then looks more like a airport farm. They're probably leftovers from the Soviet era. But don't worry. Ukraine will soon erase Soviet era. Or Putin will erase Ukraine. Who knows? Alright. As I said, Russia will eventually get around to cutting this supply line. And lo and behold, what do? They cut the supply line. No, David is right again. Why? Because it makes sense. Okay, if that is, Ukraine, engages in fixed emplacement defense, the opposition will either rock up and seize you, or they go around you. And if you do not have a secondary mobile defense unit, well, you lose territory. Now, there is the allegation that the Ukrainian National Guard and mechanized units, aka the so-called mobile defense, is used to prevent retreat and not engaging in defense of, and this is why Ukraine is losing, when technically they have the advantage. They have they have a manpower and positional defensive, right, advantage. Right? You have the advantage as the defender in that you have built up Ukraine for 14 years. Obama poured the most money in. Everybody, Biden, maybe so much. But there's the accusation, yes, when Ukraine asked for aid after Putin took Crimea back, that Biden was VP, but Obama only sent the blankets. That is also true, because there was no way the US would engage in direct confrontation with Russia, because you risk having China immediately go for Taiwan, or North Korea go for Korea, or both, or you always risk huge risks. And the people in the war business are in the business of making money off war, not wiping themselves off the map. Unfortunately, so many people are cheerleaders for war, and they are not the peace party. All the people who protested the Vietnam War right now have their little Ukraine pin on, and they go, "We hate the Putin is under the bed. Every time we sit down, he kicked the back of the seat. Every time we get the bicky, we check to see if the Putin has licked my bicky. And you know, Putin took my pudding." Every blue state, all you hear is, "See, Putin took our pudding. We must get back at Russia. The Russian aggressor. We must defend the borders of Ukraine, but not the USA. Aye!" But, as you see, from this map, clear directional indicators to move down, to push out. Right, they're going to secure all this. Right, gives artillery 1, 2, 3 on the secondary supply line, which comes down to here and into Hulapol. Most modern artillery can already fire over, let alone into Hulapol, from at least the second line, which would be back if you are within visual range. You want to be able to see the trench lines to know. But these roads, all these roads, right? And when I want to find some footage that I can show you of the movements, and maybe you'll take my word for it today. But sometimes there's only one Russian tank. And when you look at the Ukrainian army, right, there's like 7 vehicles in the entire town. And sometimes, I think I've actually shown footage before of a Ukrainian town falling. There's, like, you can fast forward the first hour sometimes, because, like, the time lapse, like, men in the trenches just sitting around, drinking tea, opening up tins of borscht. I mean, it sounds so cliche. And they'll be there for weeks. They'll hear pot shots. They'll get a call on the radio. They'll take out one of these single, looks like a single view scope, right? View through it. And they'll take a snapshot. Most of these observation points, right? They are not seeing much movement. And then once all this information, I guess, is processed, then the Russians will pretty much hit a barrage of 15 to 30, sometimes as much as, I should say 16 to 32 missiles. Sometimes it'll be 2 or 3 trucks. Usually they don't use a missile because, fire 1, usually end up firing 2. But you'll see, right? These are probing attacks. Now and again, shelling. But these are all tactical movements where Russia is plotting where and when the Ukrainians are going to be at their most vulnerable, at their most weakest, and they will hit them hard. And they will... if they won't surrender from the grind, then... I mean, this is what it is. It is a grind, okay? The softening up phase. Now, when it comes to war, it is an unfortunate thing that most people cannot seem to fathom that Ukraine and Russia shouldn't be fighting each other, that this is all about the Zelensky, okay? But Zelensky had the golden opportunity he ran on peace. Instead, he gave you the middle finger, Ukraine. All of the past troubles could have ended with Zelensky. Zelensky could have come in, done what he promised, had the backing of Europe. Russia would have said, okay, you've implemented the Minsk II, we have the neutral buffer, you have all these indictments, we'll hand over nobody because they're Russian citizens. That's the problem, isn't it? But that is where I think the first notch where revenge motivation. I mean, could you imagine Uganda not accepting, the peace deal and keeping Idi Amin in power, right? That would be insane. But today, the modern left are exactly that. They are insane. They're insufferable. And Zelensky is insufferable. Right? Everything is about his ego. He was given 2 options. Fight on. You will not have US support. Rebuild. You have US support. Then he just grumbles and complains and says, 3rd option, you come and liberate my country, give me air and give me billion. You go all the way to Moscow, you give me $1 trillion to rebuild Ukraine. Trump offers the mineral deal. Then, of course, he says, no, Putin has offered a freeze on the front line. And we rebuild Ukraine, and you remain a neutral buffer. No, I must be Captain Sky Shield of NATO. We defend the skies of NATO. We stop at the Putin. I want the Medal of Honor. and all these other demands. Now, some, like the Medal of Honor, the stories disappear very quickly, and then there's always the denial from Macron. There's the ever-loving lies after lies when it comes to this war. And people do not want the truth. So as long, I mean, if I was clickbaity, this is the problem. I find that I find that most people, right, the most corrupt, the most vile, are being rewarded right now on YouTube, right? The worst people in the world are getting the views. Now, there are disputed amounts, but over 600 drones well, they say over 600 drones and missiles, always, but the vast majority, over 600 of them, were definitely drones. Now, they say the number now reaches 704. Earlier, Al Jazeera said, and they claim, 615. Again, to a reminder, most of them are surveillance-type fixed-wing drones. There's a few cruise missiles of various types. Now, I don't claim to be an expert on Russian missiles. They seem to have far fewer types than the West. Mostly, these are high-explosive fuel devices. They do seem to waste a lot of... the Kinzhal seems to rely primarily on ground impact. So, don't know if you heard that crackling, but I do have a storm brewing in the background. Now you have the fixed wing. Now these are the Kinzhals. Then there's basically high velocity. They rely primarily on velocity. Then you have the cruise missile types. Now, a lot of these cruise missiles are jammers. They jam Russian radar, the Russians use them to jam Ukrainian radar or alert air defenses to allow missiles in. They use the drones to set off, to trigger Ukrainian air defenses. And these drones are there primarily not just to show Europe that Russia can produce large amounts of drones and hit targets, is that Russia can drain your economy at the same time doing it, right? The fear of panic of Russian drones. Seeing these big triangles in the sky and people panicking seems to be amusing. Now, Russia bombarded Dnipro. Short time later, Kremenchuk, another one of their favourite little targets, which yesterday I accidentally called it Dnipro. I don't think half the time people notice. I'm sorry, but alright, so I have a speech impediment, but it's not that pronounced or frequent. Often it's actually stress triggered. Yeah. But I shouldn't be stressed out. I mean, Ukraine is the one, but suffering. But I'm not saying the Russians who get shot at by the Ukrainians aren't suffering either. But we have a strange admission today. A photograph of a rail yard damaged. And that is a rail yard that is designed very familiar with me because I live near a rail station and we have exactly the same design poles. And then I find out that it was actually built by my fellow countrymen for Ukraine. Now, apparently, the Russians targeted on a chemical and oil shipment, and they cooked the train. I don't know if it set off anything, but it definitely halted the train, derailed, caused massive damage to the train facility. That's on the photo there. I don't know if you can see my mouse. But it shows on my end has been broadcast with the mouse. This here is where the locomotives are actually lifted up to be onto a work pit and worked on. It's where they lift the engines out for replacement, or lift them for the wheels to be replaced, which is something regularly done. Wheels are often recast. I've actually seen it done. My father was a rail enthusiast. We had 9mm train. We had a German 9mm train set. Very nice, but not anymore, unfortunately. Now, it's rare for them to actually show a military target, is my point. Sorry for reminiscing on you. Now, here you can see they say Al Jazeera says it's 653. Here we have the allegations by the Russians that they have a radio intercept of Ukrainian troops of the Ukrainian National Guard being ordered over the radio to stop retreats, to shoot them as deserters using drones. A Ukrainian commander, call sign Robinson, was ordering his subordinates, Kosovo-phobos, to shoot 2 deserters to deter the others from fleeing, and then ordered him to eliminate others who attempted any retreat. Now, we do not know exactly how many, but of course during World War II, Stalin did this. Russia did try. Russia wasn't the only one, but it's believed that the Russians were the most ruthless at it, and good old Roosevelt turned a blind eye to everything. This, of course, finding out after the war, Truman fired a lot of people associated with Roosevelt because they were so in love with Russia and communism. You know, he was flabbergasted. So it really does sound odd to talk about a Democrat having patriotism these days, I know, or anti-communist tendencies, but Truman was really anti-communist. It's Truman who asked the Republicans to investigate the spread of communism in America because the Democrats wouldn't. So he asked Joe McCarthy to head a commission. Of course, Democrats and their lies and their smears. But of course, Joe McCarthy was a hero, and the communists, infiltrators, as even pointed out by JFK, are cowards. Because they do not stand up for their beliefs. They have no beliefs. They're subversives. They don't care about undermining others. Now, the disappearance of the Russian threat from the national security strategy has really pissed off many in Washington right now. But this is part of the peace protest. Now we'll see what Russia gives in return. This is how real diplomacy occurs. But Democrats want to wag the finger and tell you what to do, and then call you the bully for not obeying them. Yes, you're the bully because you do not want the migrant to come and run for government and to sit on you and take $1 million in grants and aid money and send it to their friends to buy large mansions. Oh no, Democrats, they always lecture you on fair share. I don't think $1 billion to 3 people who claim to have fed 10,000 kids is... This is the problem. They care about the virtue, not the sin. They care, look what I did, everybody. That's not humble. They like humiliating people and saying, we got you a good insult. I mean, look at the grammar Nazis who go on and on about people who misspell words or can't talk properly or make fun of people's accents. See, they know that the immature will always go for your appearance, your speech, your mannerisms, but they can't, because they cannot argue. They cannot prove you wrong. They cannot debate. And Germany, the German government is fractured. Only 13% of German MPs backed the motion to steal Russian assets. The Bundestag has overwhelmingly voted to reject the use of frozen funds for Ukraine. Since 2022, the bloc has tried to steal Russian assets, and Hungary's call it flat-out theft and corruption. There is no international law. You cannot steal the assets of another state. Remember, you prosecuted Germans for taking the assets of France and transferring it to Switzerland to pay off German debt. Now, Maria Zakharova said that Moscow was preparing a strong retaliation if they go ahead. European Commission suggested that they have a solitary mechanism that can allow the EU to collectively absorb any risk. Oh, you mean Article 5, right? You call me mean words, and I say, you hit me, America, hit him back for me. Yeah, I think that's what this is why, and for so long, and a lot of Americans, I'm not American, but I know Americans who have said for a long time, right, you had the boomers who always go, we have to defend Europe, and a lot of Gen X's, Gen Y's, and they look at the millennials, yeah, but Gen Z, very outspoken, and asked the simple question, why should I defend you when you put yourself at risk and then hide behind us and want us to fight your wars, which you will not fight, which you ask us to fund? And when we do fight your wars, you protest against us and then say, oh, it's our right, it's our freedoms. But it's not the people who are against the war. It's the very people, the very protesters who are protesting against Ukraine started off as the very people protesting for the war in Ukraine. And that is the observation, that the left are not anti-war. They're anti-them going to war. They're pro-sending you to fight their wars. Now, Viktor Orban has pointed out the obvious, that the EU claims the moral high ground while drowning in corruption. Now, we're not just talking about the covering up of the rape, the systematic killing of white children in stabbing attacks, or the constant fear every Christmas and Easter of car attacks, the covering up of European banks and huge financial losses, bailing out European funds and time again bailing out these ridiculous development funds, writing it all off as foreign aid. The commissions themselves are facing serious charges, like Ursula von der Leyen getting a generous donation from Pfizer. There are commissions right now engulfed in scandals, but they won't go public. Corruption is not just in Ukraine. There are their European partners who funneled the money knowingly to people. There is the cover-up of the Polish business that was allegedly buying mortars, 100,000 mortars, shells for Ukraine. Right? Billions, hundreds of billions in euro in aid. And there's a couple of you commentators out there pointed out, most of the money doesn't even go to Ukraine. It goes to a fund called the Ukrainian Building Fund, which is actually money borrowed off BlackRock, and that fund has accumulated 15 billion in fees, charges, but yes, see, BlackRock, yes, the corruption is the love of money, and the gold worshippers say, love the gold. The gold! I want the gold! I'm Goldstein! I want the gold! But of course America changes the name to the guilty to protect the guilty, because they put the money into their bank. I mean, wow! But this is why they don't like Trump. Because Trump supporters have been riled up, and they want not just answers, they want the arrests. So many of my friends are saying, where's the arrests? The Ukrainian leadership has been called out time and time again on the corruption in military procurement. And instead of having two independent military procurement agencies, they want to merge it into one entity, despite the concerns of corruption. The state logistics operator and the defense procurement agency be consolidated into a company for alleged transparency and alleged deficiency. Transparency, for the first time in years, you actually showed a photograph of a military target instead of showing us the same buildings damaged and saying, look at the Putin, he look after the women and the children, which is a lie. And even Al Jazeera, oh yes, Al Jazeera, look at that. They admit that it was a railway hub. They admit that the Zaporozhye nuclear plant under Russian control. But they won't say military act. They admit that's under Russian control. So why would Russia attack their own people, their own military? They're actually hiding what was attacked. They put up fences with screens to block. This big concrete building to say the Ukrainian military denies that it's losing ground in Pavlovsk and Mirigan. The Kiev Independent is not independent. It's SBU. All media in Ukraine answers to the SBU. Poland is trying to manufacture consent for war again and again. Because the Putin is under the bed. He poisoned the potatoes. They no longer produce. They called it vodka. No, it's poison. But they admit, Ukraine media won't admit it, but Al Jazeera's admitted that Russia targeted power facilities. Again, a shift in narrative, but a shift in power, folks. A shift in power. The Ukrainians no longer have power over Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera is no longer, subservient. Completely subservient there. But they are no longer covering up for Ukraine. They're no longer printing the propaganda. Well, no longer printing all the propaganda. Now, Battle Group Center is the most active of the 6 Russian armies that are active currently. And Ukraine was warned, right, that in retaliation for attacks on Grozny, they would pay a heavy price. Battle Group Center eliminated the Ukrainian troops in Demidov and Grishno and other areas. Ukraine lost 222 to Zapad. I believe that's the Vostok. This is an increase in the casualties. But as I'm saying, they're saying right here that they eliminated them. They didn't just what should we say? Casualties. They did not say casualties. See, lost. Not eliminated. There. And the clearing of vision. They surrounded and cleared it. That is not something to be cheered. It is just a fact. It is it should never be gleeful for the victor should mourn their losses, but also remember and never forget that only a short time ago, Ukrainians used to be welcoming of Russians, used to be friendly to the Russians, and then came 2014, and all of a sudden, and if Ukrainians could turn on the Russians like that, who else would they turn on? Okay? Do you realize that people who turn like that, who become vicious warmongers, and talk about Russians as orcs and invaders and oppressors, do you not think that they will turn on you when they don't get their way, or you do something they don't like. They are so obsessed with their national security, yet they are killing off their own people. For 14 years they've been killing off their own people, almost. Off and on. The 2014 coup was just one of many instances since so-called independence where Ukraine has engaged in large-scale violence, and the government time and time again has either capitalized on it or failed to take on the militias and round them up. Again, politics brings out the worst in humanity. Now, this is the conditions in Ukraine, the road to Pavlovsk. A Russian drone surveilling the area, showing mostly burnt out. Now, these are armoured vehicles, most of which, although there's a fighting, I think that's a crab self-propelled gun there. That's in bad state. That's a cage off a tank. It seems to be might be a 58, might be an older one, but look at some of the vehicles are completely shattered. Light armoured vehicles are ridiculous on the battlefield. They are. Look at the cars. Look at some of them are absolutely obliterated by whatever hit them. I would say that one was torched by drones, exploded. When the boot's blowing out like that, you know they were carrying munitions, right? Ukrainian military often transport people in civilian cars, but there's the road. You can see the vehicles. It's not just the vehicles, it's the fields are blackened. Trucks. Look at them. Hastily mounted guns on the back. Tires intact, which is weird. You know, spend $1 million to armor the tires, and vehicle burns out, the tires are intact. You know, wow, $1 million well spent. Ridiculous, right? But there's scene after scene of broken, busted vehicles. But what don't you see? You don't see Ukrainians. You don't see any armour. Real armour. I mean, you only see armoured vehicles and infantry fighting vehicles in cope cages. The only armour we've seen so far was a self-propelled gun. It tells you, right, you compare that to Iraq. Remember Iraq, the Iraqi highway. There were dozens of vehicles every mile that were burnt out. Tanks going in full reverse at full speed, still getting hit by airborne missiles. Here, it's pretty much the same thing, except they're drones. Mostly Lancets doing the damage. These quadcopters are just observation drones. There's another burnt out infantry fighting vehicle. Most of them probably Polish, although some are Ukrainian. But by now, you know. But it just shows you, in my opinion, that this war is very low intensity. It is. You can't compare Ukraine to Iraq, right? because the US devastated more in one day than I think Russia devastates in, be generous, a week. Maybe sometimes Russia has a particularly nasty round of attacks. Like this is like the third day, and then boom, we'll have a lull. And again, the average is only a village a week. Look at Iraq. You're going. You had commanders saying they had that 10-mile advance was a slow day, and the Iraqi army, they'd often catch up to the retreating Iraqi army, and they would continue to retreat. But we haven't got a full-blown collapse of the Ukrainian forces. I think Ukrainian. It's not the armed forces of Ukraine. It's something else. But still, it is a sad situation where so many people still just gleeful for this war and have no regard for the suffering, right? The politicians who refuse peace. And you could say, Putin can stop tomorrow. But does that mean the Ukrainians will stop attacking ethnic Russians? If it takes two to start a war, right? You always hear, well, but it takes two, right? Well, you're only asking those who often ask Putin to sacrifice. They are sacrificing nothing. Zelensky wants Putin to sacrifice everything, which means he wants him to sacrifice the people of Luhansk and Donetsk who said, fuck you to Ukraine. So I think all this time, liberals keep saying, where's your empathy? Where's your empathy for illegals? Well, where's your empathy for the ethnic Russian, hey? Why are you always one-sided in your empathy? Why are you always selective in your empathy when you lecture us all the time? Because I remember Jane Fonda telling us how we had to have empathy for the North Vietnamese. So please like, share, and subscribe. Please support the channel. You can support me on Ko-Fi, Patreon, buy my books, buy merch. All my links are in the link tree. You'll find it in the description below, in my profile, or scan the QR code on the screen. Please and thank you. See you in the next video. And bye for now. Come on. Click. No.